Hello and welcome to this TCPA webinar, Bringing Young People Together to Make Better Places, a case study from Placed on Youth Voice. Thank you for taking the time to join us. My name is Gemma Hyde and I'm a Projects and Policy Manager for Healthier Placemaking at the Town and Country Planning Association. Due to some technical difficulties on the day of this webinar, this introduction has been re-recorded and then the webinar will begin, including Q&A at the end, with Jo Harrop, Place Director, Lily Dowse, a Senior Project Manager, and Bethel, a member of the Placed Rochdale Partnership Academy. The TCPA is a charity with the vision of homes, places and communities in which everyone can thrive. And our mission is to challenge, inspire and support people to create healthy, sustainable and resilient places that are fair for everyone. Our work is rooted in the understanding that the places we grow up in, live in, work and age in have a profound impact on our health, well-being and opportunities. Along with partners, we are working to explore an inclusive approach to placemaking that re-centres, engages, supports and promotes the rights, needs and voices of children and young people. I'll note here that for us, the term children and young people encompasses a broad and inclusive definition that spans all ages, from infants to teenagers, as well as diverse identities, backgrounds and experiences. So why are we here today? Engaging young people in the planning system brings insight into how places are used every day. Their perspectives can highlight what supports or limits play, movement, safety and social connection in ways that are too often overlooked by adults. When done well, engagement with children and young people is practical and purposeful, allowing them to actively shape decisions rather than simply inform them. Youth engagement can lead to more inclusive, well-used places that work better for everyone and ensure that children and young people feel recognised, valued as part of the communities they live in. The TCPA is building a set of inspiring and formative resources that we hope are also really practical to support the creation of places where children and young people can thrive. To date, these include Voice Opportunity Power, a youth engagement toolkit developed with Sport England, ZCD Architects and Grosvenor. Recordings of webinars and events just like this one on child-friendly planning, including on learning from European cities and on natural play. A case study hub created with A Place in Childhood, highlighting good practice at different scales, city, housing developments and green spaces and parks. We also have online the 2024 Raising the Healthiest Generation in History report from the House of Commons Levelling Up Committee inquiry into children and young people in the built environment, a really great evidence resource created from over 196 submissions to that inquiry. And our most recent set of resources aim to embed the rights, needs and voices of children and young people into local plans and planning policy in England. Places are influenced by planning policies, and those are too often shaped without adequate consideration of how children use places and spaces where they live. The resources were developed through a co-design process, including a workshop held in July 2025 with local authority officers, practitioners and researchers. The workshop identified a set of practical principles and priorities that local plans should consider. Key themes included the importance of early integration in plan making, the need for clear and concise guidance, and a focus on outcomes such as inclusive design, independent mobility, access to green space and play. The structure and content of these resources reflect the workshop discussions, aiming to provide a practical, policy-ready tool that responds to the realities of plan making in England. There are three documents, a background document which provides policy and evidence context for child-friendly planning, setting out the why and why children and young people should be considered in local plans and how this aligns with national policy and wider duties. Then there's a baseline and self-assessment tools package that offers just a practical framework to help authorities review existing policies and approaches, identify gaps and prioritise actions using a simple scoring system. And then child-friendly planning policies and policy prompts, a series of clear policy-ready principles that can be embedded across local plan themes, supported by questions to ask and suggested wording. So on to the webinar. Place have been involving children and young people in the design of places since 2011. Their work with young people provides invaluable insight into the views of this key, often underrepresented group. But it also delivers significant social value through building confidence, exploring career options, and encouraging active citizenship.
We do co-design workshops to really kind of dig into some of those issues in more depth, and they typically come a bit further along the process when we've had a wider input, and then we hone in on and try and solve some of those issues by working with local voices. We then also, on the next slide, work a lot with young people, and we try and work with young people in any engagement that we deliver, especially where it's of any scale. And that could be young people in primary school, secondary school, or on an outreach basis through Placed Academy, or working with youth groups as well. And then we also do online engagement, and that's kind of been a really useful platform for us. Our platform is really interactive, and like everything we do, really focuses on people being able to share their views, other people being able to engage and learn from other perspectives instead of thinking in a silo. So it has map features, it has a survey, it has ideas walls where people can post ideas and thoughts, and a whole host of other different features, and it just makes sure that we can reach people who might not be able to come to events. And then finally, the one on the right is from one of our events, and we try and do a lot of work around increasing and advocating for quality when we're talking about engagement. So this is from a conference that we did last year with a really diverse audience who had public, private and third sector participants, along with young people, looking at what good practice and engagement should be, and how we deliver greater social value throughout the project. So that's kind of the work that we do. We'll just skip this one actually. And then, so that's our engagement side. And for us, our work with young people and Placed Academy, engagement really cuts into that as well. So it kind of cuts across the two themes. So with Placed Academy, it's a programme for 11 to 25-year-olds. We launched it in 2019, and it really came from the fact that we were working a lot with young people, and we were delivering a lot of sort of shorter holiday programmes, 4-day programmes. And we were doing them to support young people getting into the built environment, but we were finding young people were coming on 2, 3, 4 programmes, but not necessarily going on a learning journey or a pathway. And our support was limited to those 4 days. So whilst it's really impactful, and some of our team actually have come through that programme and have gone on to university and then are working in the sector, we felt like there was something a bit more we could do. So it's really focusing on building skills and breaking down the barriers to access and careers in the sector, but also really embeds youth voice. So I'll just talk you through the different programmes. So we have Foundations. So Foundations is for young people aged 7 to 9. It's a 2-day programme, and it's a taster effectively of what the longer programme could be and what the built environment could involve. So for those that are thinking very early days about their career, and for some of those thinking about choosing their options, then it's a really useful taster programme. When we do these, typically they're based on live projects, and we try and link them to a tender or a project that we're delivering at the time. So feeding back whilst delivering impact. The Studio is our 9-month programme, and that's for 14 to 18-year-olds. And that's a programme which includes a 4-day summer school, and that's based on projects. So we've looked at the Liverpool City Council's local plan, in which we were doing wider engagement. And then as part of Placed Academy, we were able to work with 60 young people looking at Liverpool's local plan and what their priorities would be for that. As an example, they also do a different Saturday workshop, 6 Saturday workshops, again based on live projects. So everything from public realm to policy, and they work with the design team and the clients on a live project, and they really kind of focus on what their priorities would be, what they feel for the project, what they would like to see happening, and then we create a design report from that session so that the gold sponsors effectively get a real insight and a record of that insight. And then they do skill sessions as well, so making sure they're ready for university through things like CV and presentations, branding, photography, a whole suite of different support. Those that finish through studio can go on to the alumni, and that's an ongoing programme of support, so they can be 15 to 25, and that includes things like one-to-one mentoring from the industry, a range of different mentors that are matched to the young people's interests. We have work placements, we have booster programs, so they can do 2 3-day programs a year where they work with design professionals and officers. Um, and then also they can come and speak to our panels on our events, they come to UK Reef, they speak at conferences, so really building that network for them and that programme of support as they go into their career. And then finally, we have pathways. So that's those who are already in university, who might not know, who are interested and committed to the sector, but really want to develop those professional skills. So again, that's similar to alumni with mentoring and support and additional skill development. And they also mentor some of those people who are on their Placed Academy studio as well. So really building those transferable skills as they go into industry. All of that is free to access for young people, and we're fortunate to have amazing support from the industry. So we have about 30 sponsors, and then as I mentioned at the beginning, we cross-subsidise that as well. So we fund about 40% of the programme ourselves as part of our social value commitments. So that's kind of a big part of our programme. And then I think I've got one slide which just, does it go straight into you then, Lily?
Yeah, it goes straight into me from there.
And hands over to Lily, who'll talk about one of our Placed Academy partnership programs. Thanks, Lily.
Thanks so much, Jo. So yeah, we're here to focus today on the Rochdale Partnership Academy programme, which was commissioned by the RDA, so Rochdale Development Agency. And essentially they wanted to engage young people from right across the borough to feed into a wider regeneration framework, which would essentially guide regeneration across the town centre for the next 10 years. And so a massive opportunity for young people and their voice to be platformed and have a genuine impact actually in the town centre. And the RDA's aims were to involve young people on a deeper level so that they could feed into those priorities for the town centre. So thinking about things, their likes, their dislikes, where they spend time, and what influences that essentially. And they were a really good client because they were super involved and they really understood the kind of huge benefits that you can get from involving young people. And we're just constantly trying to sort of improve on all of the processes. So they were, yeah, a really good client to work with. The programme itself, we agreed on 8 full-day school workshops. So that was actually 7 with schools and then 1 with a youth club across the borough. So that's Rochdale, Middleton and Heywood predominantly. And then that was to follow by a 4-day intensive holiday programme. And the idea was to use the school workshops to enable a wider, sort of gather wider insights from across the borough, whilst also promoting the subsequent holiday programme for which young people would then have to apply for. So it's kind of doing two things there. And I've put together a couple of slides on what we actually did in the school workshops, which was a lot actually, given that they were only sort of 1-day pieces of work. But yeah, they were absolutely fantastic. They're always such a joy to be part of. The young people have a really good time. We always have a really good time. They're just lovely. We play a lot of games, focusing on team building and also thinking about concepts around structures and weight and stability. And then the main bulk of the workshop itself is focusing, or for this one, focused on redesigning an existing space within the town centres. So for Rochdale, Middleton, and Heywood, their town centres, and essentially answering the question, what would make you and your friends want to spend more time here? And within this, we looked at projects across the UK and abroad. So the young people pulled out precedents that they liked and they didn't like, and crucially, thought about why they liked and didn't like them. And they created diagrams like this one to express what they felt was cool according to them. So this is an uncool to cool diagram of precedents across the UK. And yeah, we just work our way through this whistle-stop tour of how to design a piece of public realm, while simultaneously gathering insights on local spaces from young people across the borough. And we looked at young people's needs. We looked at other character needs that they might come into contact with across the borough. We did a lot of site research and site analysis. And just shared this drawing here because it's a really beautiful way of illustrating an imagined space. So it's this sort of like base sketch map that has all these buildings that kind of fold out as different separate fold out elements and reveal what's inside them. And yeah, we're constantly seeing this from young people, this kind of super creative, imaginative way of showcasing ideas and thoughts. Yeah, it's just really, really lovely. Um, and we explore and test spaces in 2D and 3D. Model making is not something that schools necessarily have a lot of time to do. So actually, young people really enjoy that, and we try to get as much of that as possible into our workshops. And it's just a super creative and easy way for them to get stuck in, regardless of their learning styles or their confidence levels. Um, and then we always conclude all of our workshops with a moment for young people to share their ideas to the class. Um, and that's not only because public speaking is obviously a really useful skill to practice, but it's also a way of us demonstrating to the young people how important their ideas actually are. Um, and it's not just an exercise for exercise sake, but actually it's an important process where young people's views are actually being heard and will contribute to shaping spaces and wider processes beyond the classroom. And all the while, all the way through every workshop we do, we're always constantly feeding in discussions about the built environment sector, about careers across that, just like Jo said. So it's a really jam-packed day, full of creativity and skills building and promoting the sector education and career pathways. Um, and actually, not only were the workshops we delivered really, successful and sort of enabled high quality conversations, but actually the numbers were really high as well for this one. So across the 8 workshops, we worked with 232 young people from years 9 to 12, right across the borough. And we also attended a careers event to promote the wider programme, where we did a bit of light touch engagement work there too. And then out of that total, 40 of those applied for the Rochdale Partnership Programme 4-day February half term programme as well, which is a massive achievement. And, we always get people asking us, how do you get young people to give up their time, especially because our workshops are in holiday periods. And there's not really any answer to that, really. They just do. They come along to the school workshops, they get a bit of a taster, and then they show up to our holiday programs. And I think the reality is that young people are really desperate to get involved. They're desperate to develop skills. They're desperate to make connections. They're desperate to learn more about the built environment sector. And I think increasingly they're more and more aware of how difficult the job climate is and how much of a financial commitment university is as well. So they use our workshops as A, sort of getting a taster of the career paths on offer, and B, yeah, just sort of like developing skills and getting the commitment and sort of understanding it all really. So the 4-day programme, this was the February programme we've just run, and we had 37 young people attend every day. And it essentially took them through a creative and super hands-on process of designing a specific place in Rochdale Town Centre, so an outdoor space. And as Jo said, for this, we always include heaps of professionals from the sector to volunteer their time. And that means that they can feed in knowledge and learning around careers and opportunities within the sector, and essentially give a bit of a flavour as to what jobs are out there, what their roles are like, how to get onto these career paths. And we had 4 or 5 different professionals each day join us. So we had architects, landscape architects, engineers, we had planners, we had commissioners, we had people working in social value, we had people from the council. And crucially, we try and ensure that these professionals are working locally, so that young people's ideas go further than beyond the Partnership Academy, and could potentially feed into developments happening locally as well. So we're constantly hearing from people within the sector how difficult they find it to engage young people, and therefore how valuable they find volunteering on the programmes as well. So the impact we see across the board goes much further than we initially expect, which is really lovely. And again, across the 4 days, it was, super jam-packed, creative, super fun. We're aware that young people don't have to show up, so we work really hard to make sure that they want to keep coming back. So we looked at 4 sites for this one across Rochdale town centre, and we had 6 themes that were actually, quite complex, that they could design to. So they covered the briefs, the themed briefs covered themes like culture, nature, biodiversity, entertainment, education, health, and so on. And we had Steph Everett, head of Regen for the RDA. She actually came and gave the young people a tour and of all the sites and outlined all of the aspirations and the challenges that they were currently facing and all of the opportunities within that. And we looked at young people's needs and what changes they felt they would need to take place in order for them to want to stay in the borough in 10 years' time. We explored how specific spaces and places across the town centre made them feel and why, and what things would need to be put in place in order for them to feel safer and healthier and more welcome as young people. We created proposals to respond to all of these kind of huge questions and big site models so that they could test them within a 3D element as well. And then they paraded their site models through the town, actually, which was really nice, a nice exercise. And yeah, we made loads of models. We always make so many models. It's just a really great way of getting into the detail and exploring. So here's some of the models that we made, some of the site models. And then on the final day, we have a big celebratory event. So for this one, they were able to present their proposals to a number of really senior people, actually, from the council. So we had Pete Curty, who's head of culture and placemaking for the RDA. We had Kevin Redhead, who's director of Planet, that's an urban design and landscape firm for anyone that doesn't know, and they've got quite a few projects locally within Rochdale at the moment. And then obviously all of the rest of the cohort of young people, as well as their parents came, carers, and everyone actually listens actively to the young people's ideas, and people ask questions and engage in a serious and professional dialogue about what young people want for Rochdale Town Centre. And it's really incredible seeing a room full of young people, genuinely really confident about their ideas and holding all that power, and telling those professionals what they want. It's actually quite rare in our industry, and I think it's really brilliant. And it's challenging who gets to shape our towns and cities. I think that's the crux of it, really. We at Placed, the young people we support, everyone we work with, we're challenging who gets to shape the towns and cities that we live in and who gets a seat at that table. And we're striving to make these places and spaces representative of those who are actually using them. So putting young people at the forefront of this is absolutely crucial. It can't be a tick box exercise, and it has to be meaningful, and young people must be involved in shaping these priorities. I thought I'd conclude before I pass on to our young person, with some outcomes. And I suppose we can talk about these in 2 ways. So we can talk about outcomes in terms of the young people themselves. We monitor skills and feelings at the beginning and end of the programme. So we can give some stats. We can say 100% of young people have a better knowledge of different careers in the built environment. We can say 95% of young people that participated feel more confident talking about their views and ideas of the built environment. So that's all really, really useful stuff. But we can also talk about the impact on the cities and towns. So here we've had over 200 people, 237 people feed into an upcoming regeneration framework for their local town centre, which will shape progress for the next 10 years. So as a direct result of young people's work, we're also in talks with the council about different activities that could run over summer for young people in the town centre. We're talking about what changes can happen in the town hall square. We're talking about how to make certain spaces safer, how to make them more comfortable, and the impact goes on. It's kind of endless, really. But at the moment, the council have just run an exhibition of the participants' work in the town hall square, which the young people actually designed and formatted themselves. And that's part of Rochdale's new youth arts festival called Fab. And we're also seeing a lot of our young people from this programme apply for our wider academy programme that Jo just sort of ran us through. Um, and if they get onto it, that means that that opens up to them a whole host of support, enables them to feed into live projects that are happening across the Northwest. And they'll develop skills and they'll tap into mentorship and work experience and various talks and opportunities like Jo talked about. So yeah, it's just amazing. The impact is across the board, really. Um, and yeah, I could sit here all day and talk about why it's important to involve young people in these projects. But actually, I think maybe now's a good time to introduce Bethel, who is one of our participants from the Rochdale Academy. So she's 15. She took part in our school workshops in one of them from her school, and then she is also part of our programme for the Rochdale Partnership Academy. So I'll hand over to you, Bethel, if that's okay. And it would be really good to hear from you a bit about your experience on the programme and also what it means to you to be asked about where you live and why you think it's important for young people to be involved in shaping towns and cities.
Um, like the event we did, like in the summer, in the holidays, it was really nice. I really enjoyed it. I made lots of new friends, and like it actually motivated me to get out of bed during the holidays instead of just like sitting in bed like I was planning to. So it was really nice. What was your other question?
So we've got a few questions, haven't we? So a bit about your experience on the programme. So what you think you gained from it, and what you think you might do next. If there's anything within the built environment that you might do next.
I think I gained more confidence from the Post Academy, and I think I gained more knowledge about how planning actually works and how architecture and landscaping works. And I think I'm going to go and do the um, summer camp, summer school one in Post Academy.
Amazing. So you've applied to get onto the Placed Academy, have you?
Not yet. I'm waiting for my mum to help me fill it out. Yeah, this week, and then
Oh, nice. That's great. Um, and could you tell us a bit about what you think it means to you to be asked about your views about where you live? I think we've spoken a bit about this before, and you've said that this is the first time that anyone's really asked you about where you live and asked you to be involved in shaping your local town centre. What does that mean to you?
I feel like it's very crucial for the young people to like have an input on. One sec. I think it's very crucial for like young people like me to contribute into like talking about the society because it's like us that's gonna be like the next generation living in this area. And if like none of us like how this area like is and how it's like come after so many years, I think no one's gonna want to live here anymore. So it's like really good that young people like me are contributing into what did we want up for Rochdale.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And we speak a lot about on the programme about young people being experts in their local area. I think that's, it's really important to involve young people who are going to be using these spaces for a lot longer than the rest of us. These are the next generation that are going to be coming forward, and to sort of take those insights and embed them into those frameworks going forward is completely critical. Thank you so much, Bethel. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we hand back over to Gemma?
No.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. Gemma, back to you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lily and Jo, and a really big thanks to Bethel for joining us after probably a very long day at school. Yeah, I mean, brilliant. So much to sort of unpack in that. I don't know if, please feel free to put any questions in that Q&A box if you do have them. Jo, I know that you made a comment about slides being shared, and happy to do whatever works for you guys on that one.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to share them.
That's fine, because also we managed to cleverly not record the very beginning of the webinar, so we can make sure that we do that. I know, honestly, that's fine. So yeah, if you don't mind, I'll ask a question just to get us started. I guess my question perhaps to Jo and Lily at this point is, you've got a wealth of experience here and you've been at this for a long time, and you talk about it, being practical and creative and purposeful. But, if somebody was at the beginning of this journey and doesn't have, they're not in the Northwest, they can't necessarily call on your services very easily, what might be something that they could do or start to think about in terms of doing some meaningful engagement that isn't just the sort of common consultation stuff that we perhaps have been doing lots of to date?
I mean, I would say there's probably some great people doing other stuff as well, especially I'm conscious of if in the south there's a lot more organisations. I think there's a lot less up here, and I think if you can and you have the opportunity, there's always value in reaching out to them. I think it's the same principle in terms of engagement. There's real value in having someone with that's their expertise and specialism, and that you can support those conversations, but they can at least sort of challenge you about what you're asking and why you're doing it and what your outcome you want to see. I think there's that real value and that expertise of working with young people. I know that lots of professionals and design teams often go and do workshops with schools anyway, so they do have some experience. But I think there's a difference between youth voice and youth engagement and going in and doing a workshop with marshmallows and spaghetti, for example, is kind of both have got great value. But I think in terms of any engagements, it's making sure you've got your questions right, that you've thought how are you going to ask those questions, about how you're going to get that meaningful data, and how you're going to report that back in a way that's useful to clients. So I would always recommend trying to reach out to people who do specialise in that. Failing that, I think it's really almost repeating what I've just said. It's kind of thinking about what your purpose is and what is your conversation, what's that scope of influence that those young people you're speaking to have, and be really honest about that in the session. So if there isn't any, and actually what you're doing is delivering a social value workshop, be honest about that, and it's still got great value. You're still introducing careers and pathways and developing skills. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. But if you're delivering a youth voice and an engagement piece, be honest about what the focus is, why you're doing it, what you are hoping to get from them, and then be really creative in terms of how you capture that. I think making sure you ladder activities, so you don't just come in and expect young people to have the language to be able to talk about place. They know what they like. But like most people, if you kind of go, we're going to talk about architecture, what do you think? There's a real nervousness and people don't want to get anything wrong. I think that's particularly true in a classroom environment where there's a real right and wrong tendency within education. You know, we've all got to get, grade 9s, and everyone's got to be exactly the same. So there's not a lot of space for creative thinking. So I think, laddering that and taking young people on a journey to build to the questions that you really want to ask is what I would say. Lily, isn't you that?
I mean, I totally agree. And I think the only thing I would add to that is to make sure that you're doing it at the right time. Often there's quite a small, well, there's often a very defined window where impact can, genuinely happen, where the engagement that you're doing can genuinely have an impact on shaping whatever it is that you're working towards, whether it's a master plan or a framework or a strategy. And making sure that you are working within that. And if you're not, then being honest about that and saying that it's an exercise for an exercise sake rather than actually it having an influence on a specific thing. But yeah, timing is really important, and that's something that we're constantly sort of trying to juggle and make sure that we are fitting into those right timeframes.
Really great point. Yeah, I love that bit about just being transparent about what what you're doing, why you're doing it, and the the purpose and how that may or may not be able to influence certain things. Part of that as well. So, sorry, Jo.
No, it's fine. I was going to just say I was going to pick up on Ben's the second question on there because I think that kind of links.
Yeah, it does. Go for
it. I think obviously what we spoke about then is where it's a project specific engagement, and I think similarly with broader engagement, there is a value in wider thematic conversations. I think some issues are site specific. Some problems and options and opportunities are very localized. However, I would say across all of our workshops, we're going to see the same themes coming up time and again, and that's about somewhere that they can go and spend time with friends without spending money, somewhere that feels quality, sustainability, and green, and really common themes. And in terms of that, I do think you can absolutely have those conversations. I think typically where we're having thematic conversations, so even for example, a local plan, quite thematic, quite complex to kind of really delve into that in terms of planning, we will have those thematic conversations, but then we will still encourage them to go, what would that look like in a place? And a place doesn't have to be real. We do a workshop where we go, we're creating an island in the Mersey. Let's apply those local planning principles that you think are really important in a local plan to this hypothetical new place. What would that new place look like? So we can certainly do thematic, and I think that can have real value. But I think it's still around how to apply those themes to a place that really helps them to challenge and work that through. And we're about to, as part of Placed Academy, we have a platinum partner that we're working with on that. And we're actually doing a retrospective piece looking at those common themes from across our academy workshops and around what actually would attract young people to town centres, what would make them stay, and what are the push-pull factors that might make them leave the place they live and move somewhere else. So that's very thematic, but then can be applied on a local level. So yeah, just tap in on that one.
That what would make you stay question, I think is really interesting, especially in light of some of the recent sort of discussions about young people and families with children leaving city centres in particular. And I just think, well, what a fascinating way to frame it as to what changes would you want to see in order to even consider staying here for the next 10 years is a really interesting discussion. So yeah, no, that's really interesting. Should we also look at the other two Ben questions? But the first question in the chat is about those tensions between wanting to design spaces young people want to use and then issues potentially around antisocial behaviour or policing commercial developers wanting to design young people out of space. And an invitation if Bethel would like to respond to that as well. But maybe Jo or Lily, you might start. It's an interesting base assumption in the question.
Lily, do you have a particular thought on it?
No, I'm just having to think about that. I'll come back to it if that's okay.
Yeah. Bethel, would you like to comment? I guess it's like, do you feel welcome in spaces is probably the question there. Like, do you feel there's places that you and your friends can spend time, and do you feel like there's a push for you to move on in certain places if you're with friends?
I feel like around Rochdale, there's not a lot of places for you to like go out and hang out with your friends. Like as a girl, I feel like most places is just parks, football courts, and just like painting. There's like a few painting places and all that, but it's like there's not really a broad variety of like activities to do with your friends and spaces to do. And most times, if you wanted to like do like pottery painting or just painting in general, I feel like there's a certain demand of how long you can stay there until they have to like say, oh, you have to get a move on now. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think that's something that we hear off a lot of young people, definitely. I think there's a big education piece. I mean, I guess the classic example is the use of a bench. So people will say they want a bench. Young people want somewhere to sit. And quite often that's something that's like it's not just young people, it's those on the fringe of society who haven't got money to go and sit in the cafes and the restaurants and go shopping all the time. I would say a lot of the things that we hear off young people are not unique to young people. They're more vulnerable people, they're older people, people experience homelessness, people with addiction issues. There's a whole host of people who feel that there's nowhere they're allowed to spend time in the public space without being moved on. So I'd say it's a common parallel that we hear across our engagement work as well. But I think that's fundamentally because we're designing places that don't encourage or allow people to spend time. And I think there's a real interest and irony. I think in terms of somewhere like in Liverpool, we have Liverpool One, which is our shopping space, which is open. And it's open at all times. It's not a covered shopping space, and it's somewhere that young people really like going. And as a parent of teenagers, I feel comfortable in going there because it has got security, it's clean, and it's really visible. But at the same time, there's only certain places they're allowed to linger. And so it's kind of the real irony. There's young people are making a choice to spend places where it's public, where it's visible, where it feels safe, but then at the same time we're trying to move them on from that exact same space. And so I think there is a conflict. I don't think it's easy to resolve. I think there needs to be a big education piece around there, but I think we need to be creating those public realm spaces that are better and that allow lingering and allow all people to spend time in a range of different environments. So I'm not sure I really answered it as such, but I would agree it exists, but not just for young people. Lily,
Yeah,
did you want to add anything? Or
no, I was just going to say that that really resonates in terms of being better at doing shared space. And coming back to your park bench, if a older person is sat on that bench, they're not accused of loitering, but if it's a teenager, then we describe it differently. So I think there's definitely some social sort of change in education and in that as well. But also then just designing spaces that recognize that they are for young people as well. They're for all people, but that includes young people somehow, that we don't just exclude them because they're young. So that makes sense.
I mean, as a kind of random aside, I do remember recently I was sitting in John Lewis on Friday night, and it was very interesting because young people were choosing to hang out and sit in the sofa area. They were sitting in the sofas clearly because there was nowhere else for them to go and they were causing no trouble, but they kept getting moved on. Whereas I noticed old people doing exactly the same thing, and that was perfectly fine. And they had
Yeah.
no more intention of buying that sofa than the young people. So I think there is an automatic assumption that there's going to be trouble just by the pure nature of young people spending time in a place. But it was very interesting to watch how that was addressed by different staff members.
Then there's another question around new ideas around engagement, maybe things that you're thinking about that you've not done yet, certainly using sort of digital platforms and things like that. I didn't know if there's anything that you wanted to add on that question.
Yeah, and so digital, I very much that use keeping it for physical medium. Before COVID, we were very reluctant to use any digital, and we would kind of try and talk clients out because actually we think that conversation piece is so much more valuable. I think the nuances within a conversation versus online, you can get a lot more. So, for example, how would you like the square to feel online, like Europe? But actually, if you have that conversation, it's like, what do you mean by that? What are the aspects of that you're looking for? What would you like to see created here? And how do we take that? So it doesn't have the subtlety online. However, in COVID, we had to kind of have a bit of a pivot around, and so we did use the platform that we have, and we use the platform now, an engagement platform. We really kind of thought hard about what that should be. So I think engagement online can have a real value, but I think I would always encourage an online platform to allow for dialogue and like a to-fro sort of piece, because I think there's real value in people kind of putting an idea out there, but someone else being able to go, actually, that's not what I'm seeing, or this is a great idea, I really like it. So the platform we use, someone can post an idea and others can simply like or dislike it as well. So we get a bit of a sentiment, or they can reply to a comment. So I think there is a real value. We've really seen that as a tool that sometimes works, but not always. And it really depends on that community and the projects. But I would say that where it's a bigger piece of engagement, we do try and build online in as an addition, but really on its own. Yeah. I can't remember the other part of the question.
Well, no, you sort of touched on it, that actually physical is sort of your preferred mode, and that there are benefits to doing that, certainly in person.
There's also a benefit. Sorry, I keep interrupting. I would say there's the other wider benefit as well, though, is a social impact benefit of doing it in person. I think for us as a social enterprise, to have a conversation, and quite often, especially more vulnerable people or people who don't feel heard, it's so rare that someone will actually give them the time to have a conversation about their perspective and their views, and that in itself is incredibly valuable. And we have a lot of people who kind of at the end of speaking to us for a little while will say thank you for listening. The people coming to some of our drop-ins could have a whole range of personal circumstances, which just means that so often they hit a wall of where there's nowhere for them to go. So that is the other side of the conversation, as well as us allowing to kind of address any concerns, to provide actual information instead of misinformation that they might get online or they've heard on social media. There's that bigger piece about isolation, loneliness, feeling part of your community, feeling heard, being part of a shared experience as well.
So just on that then, Emily's asked about how you reach young people. So I guess, do you tend to go through established groups and schools and that route?
Yeah, we get asked this a lot, don't we, Jo? People consider young people as hard to reach, which we don't agree with. We just think that people aren't doing it in the right way, actually. I think there's two things that we need to consider. One is we need to go to where they are. So that used to be youth clubs, but increasingly we don't have as many as we used to, actually. I think I saw a percentage, something like 85% are now not there. So we have less and less youth clubs. So now we're using spaces, not platforms, but actual spaces where they are. So that's schools and groups like that, and community groups. And then the second thing I think we need to consider is that it has to be a two-way thing. We see a lot that organisations are going to collect data and insights from young people, and that being the end of the conversation. And actually, it needs to be two-way. Yes, you can collect that data. Yes, we need information to feed in these frameworks and into these designs, but also young people need to be gaining something out of it too, to make it fair. So they need to be developing their skills, they need to be making connections, they need to be having fun, and they need, like Jo says, they need to know that their voices are actually doing something, they are being heard, and it is going somewhere that is having impact, I think.
Then if we can just squeeze this one in. So it's just a question about like rural areas. And I don't know if there's any examples you might be able to point to of engagement strategies that have worked in more rural places.
It is really hard, I think, to get the same level of representation within rural areas. We have worked in West Midlands, which I think is the largest local authority area in England. It's massive, but incredibly rural. And we did a combination. So we had online engagement, but we also did some targeted sessions as well. So it is around that representative mix of people rather than trying to get everybody. What I'd say is the key thing is making sure you have put enough budget and enough resource into doing that, because it is really important to kind of reach out to have those conversations. And so I think the same tools can work in terms of drop-ins, workshops, going out there, speaking to schools, going into schools, having online, but it will cost you a bit more. You just need more resource.
I think we will wrap it up there, but really grateful to Bethel and Jo and Lily for their time this afternoon and for presenting some of this work. Obviously, you can go to the Placed website to read more, and I hope that you do that. And the TCPA's website obviously contains the resources that we talked about in the beginning. But yeah, I hope everyone has a lovely evening and it's sunny where you are. And thank you to everybody.